The obese widow's Christmas basket got 0 bids. The rancher saw her worth and paid triple. The annual Willow Creek Christmas charity auction was always the brightest night of the winter season. Lanterns hung from the rafters of the town hall, casting warm amber halos over the crowd. Evergreen garlands draped the walls, the scent of pine mingling with cinnamon cider from the refreshment tables. Laughter rose and fell like bells in the cold December air. But at the very back of the hall, standing half-hidden behind a pillar, Martha Ellison clutched her Christmas basket as if it were a lifeline. She smoothed the gingham cloth for the 10th time, her fingers trembling slightly. She had poured everything she had into this basket. Her time, her ingredients, her heart. The widowhood years had taught her a lot about loneliness, but baking had always been her way of stitching herself back together. Inside the basket lay a loaf of warm spiced apple bread, 2 jars of blackberry jam from her late husband's vines, a gingerbread cookies shaped like angels, a small crocheted snowflake she'd made while praying her evenings away. All of it wrapped with care, tied with a ribbon she'd ironed flat so it would look crisp and new. This was the one night a year she felt brave enough to stand among people instead of blending into the shadows. The auctioneer, a round-bearded man with a booming voice, called out the names of various baskets. Mrs. Donovan's holiday ham platter, $20. Do I hear 25? Miss Clara's peppermint fudge, sold for 15. Applause filled the hall. Women exchanged proud smiles. Men slapped each other on the back. Martha swallowed hard. She'd been practicing her smile all day, the one that said she was fine even when her heart throbbed like a bruised apple. Finally, the auctioneer lifted her basket. And here we have Mrs. Martha Ellison's homemade Christmas basket, packed with all sorts of delights. A few heads turned. Some didn't. Martha felt eyes flick over her, her round arms, her soft middle, the way her shawl pulled slightly tight over her shoulders. The air seemed to shift. The auctioneer cleared his throat, voice slightly unsure. Let's start with $5. Silence. No hands raised. $5? He repeated, eyes scanning the room. Someone coughed. Someone else looked at her basket, then away quickly. A young woman whispered too loudly. Bless her heart, she always bakes too much. Probably couldn't eat it all herself. A man snorted. Well, someone's gotta help her finish it. Laughter rippled, low and cutting. Martha tried to straighten her shoulders but felt them curve inward instead. Her cheeks warmed with embarrassment. The auctioneer shifted awkwardly. All right, $3? Anyone? Still nothing. Martha looked at the polished wood floor, wishing she could disappear into it. The clock ticked. Her heart thudded. Eyes pricked hot. Fine, the auctioneer sighed. $1 then. What? Anyone? It's for charity. A long beat of quiet. And that was when she knew, not a single person wanted something made by her. Not her jam. Not her bread. Not her gingerbread angels with their tiny sugar glow halos. Not her. She swallowed hard, reaching to step down from the stage, ready to retrieve her basket and slip out into the night. When the doors suddenly swung open, slamming against the wall with a gust of winter wind. Snowflakes spiraled into the hall like glitter. Every head turned. Standing there, framed in cold moonlight, was Luke Harland, the rancher from the North Ridge. Tall, broad-shouldered, dusted in snow, with a presence that quieted the room without saying a word. His gaze swept the hall, taking in the auction items, the people, then landing on her. Martha stiffened. Luke's expression softened, melting the ice in his eyes. What's the bid? He asked, nodding toward her basket. The auctioneer hesitated. Well, we haven't gotten one yet. Luke frowned. No bids. Martha looked down again, mortified. He walked forward, the floorboards creaking under his boots. Then put me down for $30. A stunned murmur erupted. 30? Triple? For her basket. He's out of his mind. But Luke didn't look at them. He stepped closer to Martha, not touching her, but standing near enough that she felt his warmth through the cold draft. His voice lowered, meant only for her. It's worth at least that, he said gently. Maybe more. She lifted her eyes, searching his face for mockery. There was none. Only sincerity. Only steadiness. Only a man who saw her basket, and her. For the first time in a long while, Martha felt something inside her unclench. Something that had been wound tight since her husband died. Luke tipped his hat slightly, offering her a small, respectful smile. And for the first time that evening, Martha breathed without pain. Snow swirled over the boardwalk outside the town hall as the last of the auction-goers spilled out into the evening. Lanterns flickered in the cold wind, and horses snorted clouds of steam into the dark. Martha stood beside her old wagon, her basket tucked against her chest. She waited until the crowd thinned, hoping to slip away before anyone noticed her. Her cheeks still burned with humiliation, but she kept her head lowered, pretending to inspect her horse's harness. Her fingers trembled too much to untie the rope. "Martha, wait." His voice was deep, steady, and close enough that her breath caught. She didn't turn right away. She needed one more second, one small shield of air, before facing the man who had just spent more on her basket than anyone in town had ever spent on anything she made. When she finally looked over her shoulder, Luke Harlan was standing a few steps away, snowflakes melting in his dark hair, his gloves tucked into his belt. His eyes were the kind that didn't dart around nervously, they simply held a person calm and sure. "You walked off before I could talk to you," he said softly. I didn't want to make a scene," she murmured. He smiled faintly. "You didn't? But I'd like a moment if that's all right." She hesitated, clutching her basket tighter. "I wanted to thank you," she finally whispered. "For the bid." "You don't owe me thanks," he said. "I wanted that basket." Her breath faltered. "You're being kind." "No," he said, shaking his head gently. "I'm being honest." He reached into the basket, slowly giving her time to pull it back if she wanted to. She didn't. He lifted a gingerbread cookie shaped like a little angel with sugar-dusted wings. His eyes crinkled. "You even gave it a halo," he said, admiring it with a softness that made her heart ache. "It's silly," she murmured. "It's beautiful." He bit into it, and everything about his expression changed. His eyebrows raised. His shoulders eased. His eyes closed for a moment, just a moment, as if he were letting himself feel something he hadn't felt in years. When he opened them again, his voice was quiet but full. "Martha, that's the best thing I've tasted since my mama passed." She blinked. "That's just gingerbread." His gaze held hers. "It tastes like comfort." The wind lifted the hem of her shawl. A few townsfolk walked past, staring, whispering, but Luke didn't spare them a glance. He stood close enough to shield her from their eyes without making it obvious. "You didn't have to buy my basket, Luke," she said softly. "I know how folks see me." His jaw tightened, not at her but for her. "How folks see you," he said slowly, "isn't the same as what's true." She looked away, her vision blurring with shame she'd carried for too many years. Luke's voice gentled. "I'm not doing anything out of pity. I bought your basket because I wanted it." He paused. "And because good work deserves to be valued." "But, triple the starting price?" she asked, her voice small. He shrugged as if it were obvious. "It was worth it." Her throat thickened. No one had ever spoken like that about anything she made, not since her husband, long before illness took him. Luke cleared his throat, suddenly looking almost shy. "Actually," he said, "I wanted to ask something of you." She blinked. "Ask something?" "I've got a ranch full of hungry men through the winter. And the cook I hired went and married a gal down in Laramie last month." He glanced down at the cookie. "And if the hands had baked goods half as good as this, well, they might actually stop complaining." She let out a soft, startled laugh. He smiled at the sound like it was something rare and precious. "I was wondering," he continued, "if you'd consider making a few holiday baskets for the ranch. Paid honest wages, of course. Whatever you'd charge, I'll match it." Martha's breath stilled. "No one's ever asked for my baking like that," she whispered. "I'm asking," he said quietly, "because I want your baking. Not anybody else's." She shook her head slightly, overwhelmed. "But the town has plenty of women who bake." "I didn't ask the town," he murmured. "I asked you." A hush fell between them. Snowflakes drifted between their bodies, soft as falling feathers. Her voice wavered. "Luke, I don't want to make trouble for you." "Martha," his tone was steady, almost tender. "You could never make trouble for me." Something warm, unexpected, and frightening fluttered in her chest. Before she could gather her thoughts, Luke tipped his hat. "I'll be by tomorrow afternoon with payment for the first order, if that's all right." "You're sure?" "I'm certain." He stepped back, but only by a stride, still watching her with quiet warmth. "Get home safe," he said softly. Then he turned and walked off into the snowfall, leaving her standing in the drifting quiet, with a warm gingerbread cookie, $30, and a heart suddenly beating with questions she never thought she'd ask again. The morning after the auction, the entire town of Willow Creek seemed to wake up with Martha Ellison's name on its tongue. By noon, the gossip had spread from the general store to the post office, from the blacksmith's forge to the schoolyard. Snow dusted the rooftops like powdered sugar, Yet the air inside the town buzzed sharp and mean. All because rancher Luke Harlan had bid $30 on a basket made by a widow most folks barely noticed. The general store. Martha had hoped to slip in quietly, buy a sack of flour, and leave before the whispers caught up with her. But the bells above the door jingled far too loudly when she entered, and every head turned, too quickly to appear innocent. She kept her chin tucked down and walked straight to the baking aisle. Two women near the fabric counter leaned close, pretending to study buttons. "Well, did you see how he looked at her?" the younger one murmured. "Oh please," the older scoffed. Luke Harlan was just being polite. $30 polite? Men pity women like her. It's a kindness, nothing more. Martha clutched the flour bag so hard it crinkled. She tried to move to the next aisle, but the words followed her like burrs catching her skirt. Another voice floated from near the stove display. "I heard he felt bad because she looked like she was gonna cry." "That's not what I heard," a third voice said, lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "I heard he's desperate. A man that alone all winter'll take what he can get." The women snickered. Heat rushed to Martha's face. She stepped sideways into the shadow of a tall shelf, breathing slowly, trying to keep her composure. Rumors she could handle, she'd lived with them her whole adult life. But hearing them out loud, hearing the cruelty spoken like truth, it sliced deeper than she expected. She turned to leave, and nearly walked straight into a broad chest. He stood there wearing his winter coat and snow-flecked hat, a crate of supplies in one arm. His gaze instantly shifted from casual to sharp. "You all right?" he asked, voice low but warm. Martha swallowed, trying to force a smile. "I'm fine. Just shopping." His eyes flicked to the aisle behind her, where the women still whispered, now pretending to examine ribbons. Luke's jaw tightened. Without raising his voice, without a single harsh word, he stepped closer to Martha, as if positioning himself between her and the whispers, turning his body just slightly to shield her. The simple act made her chest ache. "Did you need help with anything?" he asked gently. No, she said quickly, clutching her flour. "I don't want to get in your way." "You couldn't get in my way if you tried." The warmth in his tone startled her. So did the sincerity in his eyes, steady, unwavering. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. "This is for the first batch," he said softly. "I figured I'd better pay you up front so you don't think I'm stringing you along." She blinked. "Luke, I haven't made anything yet." "I know. I'm paying because I trust you." The words hit her in a place she'd forgotten existed. Trust. It was something she hadn't heard from another soul in years. She hesitated. "You don't have to." "I want to," he said in that quiet, dependable way of his. "I told you I need your baking. Winter gets long out at the ranch. Men work better when their hearts are fed, not just their stomachs." Her breath hitched. "You give that kind of warmth, Martha," he said softly. "Not everyone knows how." A few feet behind them, the whispers died, snuffed out by the weight of Luke's words. The women pretended to browse lace, but now their eyes darted away, uncomfortable. Martha felt the shift, but Luke didn't even glance at them. His attention stayed on her and her alone. "Let me carry your things," he offered. "Oh, Luke, that's not necessary." "I know." He smiled gently. "But I want to." She let him take the flour from her hands. His fingers brushed hers, warm, calloused, careful, and she felt that touch long after he pulled away. They walked together to her wagon. Luke loaded the supplies, his movements unhurried, as if he had nowhere else more important to be. Martha wasn't used to such kindness. Not without a catch. Not without someone waiting for her to apologize for taking up space. But Luke helped her simply because he wanted to. When he finished, he didn't rush to go. Instead, he lingered beside the wagon, breath fogging in the cold. "You doing all right with all the talk going around?" he asked gently. She looked down at her hands. "People talk," she whispered. "Let them," he replied, voice firm but warm. "They talked about my father when he courted my mother too." Her head lifted. "Why?" "Because she was big," he said simply. "Soft-spoken, big-hearted, and big-bodied." He shrugged. "Folks judge what they don't understand." Martha's throat tightened. Luke gave her a soft, steady look. "And it never stopped my father from loving her." The words hit Martha harder than any gossip ever could. Luke touched the brim of his hat. "I'll see you tomorrow, Martha." Then he walked away, leaving her standing in the cold, her hands warm around a leather pouch, her heart warm with a feeling she hadn't dared feel in years. Hope. The next morning dawned pale and quiet, snow lying thick and untouched over the hills like a blanket of whipped cream. In Martha's kitchen, however, warmth radiated from the old brick oven, filling the room with the scents of ginger, clove, brown sugar, and slowly melting butter. Her wooden table was covered in bowls, jars, and little drifts of flour. Her cheeks were dusted with it too, but she didn't mind. She felt alive in a way she hadn't felt for a long while. Luke Harland had asked for her baking. Luke Harland valued it. That alone made her hands steady as she shaped each gingerbread cookie, giving them little smiles, tiny collars, and angel wing impressions. Still, every so often her breath would hitch with doubt. Why would a man like him want anything from a woman like me? What if he was just being kind? What if I disappoint him? Her hands faltered over the dough. She wasn't used to being wanted. Not for her work. Not for her presence. Not for anything. She swallowed hard, trying to silence the old voices in her head, voices of neighbors, of gossiping women, of her own self-doubt. But then she remembered Luke's voice from yesterday. Good work deserves to be valued. I trust you. Those words steadied her again. By noon she had 3 baskets filled, each one lined with clean linen and packed with apple bread, gingerbread, spiced nuts, and small crocheted snowflakes she'd made by lamplight the night before. She was adjusting the ribbon on one basket when she heard the crunch of boots outside. Her breath caught. He'd come early. She wiped flour from her hands onto her apron, but only smudged it more, and hurried to the door. When she opened it, a gust of winter air swept in, along with Luke Harland, standing tall on her porch, his coat dusted with fresh snow. His cheeks were pink from the cold, and he held his hat respectfully in his hands. Martha, he greeted gently. Afternoon. She felt her face warm despite the chill. Luke, you're early. He smiled, a soft, slow curve of his lips. Couldn't help it. Her heart tripped. He stepped inside as she moved aside, and the moment he crossed the threshold, he stopped short. The warm kitchen light glowed over him, and he breathed in deeply. Lord, he murmured. It smells like heaven wandered into this kitchen. Her cheeks burned at the compliment. I made a few things. I wasn't sure what your men liked best. He walked closer, stopping beside her table covered in baked goods. His eyes softened in wonder. Martha, he said softly, you didn't make a few things. You made enough to feed half the county. She winced. Oh, I can scale back. I just didn't want to disappoint you. He turned to her then, really turned, and his voice dropped warm and deep. You couldn't disappoint me if you tried. The sincerity in his tone hit her like heat from the oven. She looked down at her apron, flustered. Luke stepped closer, gently taking one of the gingerbread cookies shaped like angels. May I? He asked. You don't have to ask, she whispered. He took a slow bite, and his eyes widened with genuine pleasure. Martha, he breathed, this is even better than yesterday. Something fluttered in her chest, light and fragile. He finished the cookie, brushing crumbs from his glove, then looked around the kitchen again. She saw his gaze catch on her crocheted snowflakes. You make these too? Oh yes. Just something to keep my hands busy. He picked one up delicately, the way a man might hold something precious. My mother used to make these, he murmured. I haven't seen one since she passed. Her breath stilled. I didn't know, she said softly. You couldn't have. His voice gentled even more. But it means more than you know. Before she could respond, a low creak sounded behind them, the shifting of old wood as the kitchen warmed. It made her jump slightly. Luke noticed. You all right? He asked. Oh yes. Just nerves. He frowned gently. Nerves? Martha, I don't want you feeling nervous around me. She looked at her hands folded tightly in front of her. It's just been a long time since anyone wanted something I made. He stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she felt the heat from his skin, the quiet steadiness of him. Martha, he said softly, I don't just want your baking. I appreciate you. Her breath caught. I'm not used to hearing that. You will be, he murmured. Her heart thudded. For a moment, neither of them moved. The kitchen felt impossibly warm. A quiet spark flickered between them, frightening and gentle all at once. Luke cleared his throat softly, breaking the tension before it overwhelmed them both. Let me help you load these baskets, he said. You don't have to carry them, she replied. He smiled faintly. I want to. For the next few minutes they worked together, passing baskets, arranging them, brushing against each other in small, accidental touches that lingered longer than necessary. And each time their fingers brushed, Martha felt something blossom in her chest, slow and trembling and entirely new. When the last basket was loaded onto Luke's wagon, he turned to her, his breath clouding in the cold air. "I'll be back in a couple days," he said. "If you'll make more." She hesitated only a moment. "I'd like that," she said softly. His eyes warmed, full of unspoken things. "Well then," he murmured, "you'll see me soon." He tipped his hat, climbed into his wagon and drove off through the fresh snow. Martha watched until he disappeared over the ridge. Then, alone on her porch, hand pressed to her heart, she finally whispered, "What's happening to me?" And the winter wind carried her whisper into the quiet hills, where hope echoed back. Snow drifted softly over the street as Martha stepped out of the church hall, clutching her empty wicker basket to her chest. The lantern lights behind her flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the silent town square. She hadn't expected company. But he was there, waiting. Luke Caldwell stood beside his horse, reins loose in his hand, as though the night itself had instructed him to stay put until she appeared. Martha stopped mid-step. A woman her size didn't often freeze. She was deliberate, sturdy, but seeing a man waiting for her felt like stepping into someone else's life. "Evenin', Mrs. Harper," he said softly, removing his hat with a respect that nearly undid her. It's Martha," she murmured, unable to look directly at him. His smile was small but warm. "Martha then." The way her name sounded in his voice did something to her she couldn't quite name. A kind offer that felt impossible. "You walkin' home alone?" Luke asked gently. She nodded. "I always do." He shifted, thoughtful, not awkward, not pitying, just concerned. "Well," he said, "tonight you don't have to." Martha's throat tightened. "Luke, I don't want to be any trouble." "It ain't trouble," he said. "It's a good walk, and good company." Company. For her. The widow whose basket got 0 bids. Slowly, hesitantly, she slipped her hand through his offered arm. It felt like stepping into a warmer world. Soft confessions under falling snow. They walked the quiet road, boots crunching the fresh powder. "Your Christmas basket was something beautiful," Luke said after a moment. Martha laughed without humor. "No one thought so." He shook his head. "That whole room was blind tonight." She blinked at him. "Why did you pay so much for it?" Luke shrugged lightly. "Because it was worth it. Because you put care in every piece." The cold night suddenly felt warmer. "You don't even know me," she whispered. Luke's voice softened. "I know enough. I see kindness. I see strength. I see a woman folks should have appreciated a long time ago." Her heart felt unsteady, like she didn't know where to hold it. A slip, a catch, a moment. Just as they turned onto her small lane, Martha's boot slid on a thin, hidden patch of ice. She pitched sideways. And Luke's arms wrapped around her instantly, steady and strong, catching her before the fall even completed. "You all right?" he murmured, voice close enough she could feel its warmth. She tried to pull away, embarrassed. I'm too heavy." "You're sturdy," Luke interrupted, not harshly but firmly. "I like sturdy. World's hard enough. Good folks ought to be built strong." She stared at him, stunned. No mocking. No pity. Just truth said kindly. A small, trembling laugh escaped her. Luke's smile widened just a little. Her door, his braveness. They reached her porch too soon, the warm light glowing through her small cottage window. Luke didn't rush. He didn't fidget. He simply stood with her in the quiet snow, a presence steady as the mountains. "Martha," he said gently. She met his eyes, heart thudding. "I'd be honored if you'd let me stop by sometime. Not out of charity. Not out of obligation." His smile turned crooked. Maybe partly for the gingerbread. But mostly for the company. Martha's breath hitched. No one had asked for her company in years. Maybe ever, truly. Her voice trembled. "I would like that, Luke." A warmth filled his eyes that made her toes go numb in her boots. "Good night, Martha." He tipped his hat, turned and walked back into the falling snow. Martha stayed on her porch long after, hands pressed to her chest, breath trembling, because something inside her, something dusty and forgotten, had begun to wake up again. Something that felt like hope. The next morning dawned crisp and bright, sunlight glinting off the fresh snow that blanketed the small town of Red Fern. For most folks, it would be an ordinary Saturday. But not for Martha. Not after last night. She moved slowly through her kitchen, hands trembling as she kneaded a fresh batch of dough. She kept glancing at the window, at the snowy path leading up to her porch, as though expecting a knock any moment. Expecting him. But with every minute that passed, her heart battled itself. He probably regrets asking. He was just being kind. "You're just Martha, don't start dreaming." Then she'd remember how he said her name. and the doubts would quiet for a heartbeat. The knock she didn't believe was real. Just as she pulled a tray of warm gingerbread from the oven, a firm, polite knock echoed through the house. Martha nearly dropped the tray. She wiped her hands on her apron, tried to calm the galloping of her heart, and opened the door. Luke stood there, hat in hand, coat dusted with snow, a shy, almost boyish, smile on his lips. "Morning, Martha." Her breath caught. "Look, you really came." He chuckled softly. "Well, I promised, didn't I?" But there was more behind his eyes, something unspoken, something quietly hopeful. "May I come in?" She stepped aside, suddenly aware of the flour on her apron and the warmth in her cheeks. A kitchen full of aroma and meaning. Luke stepped inside, inhaling deeply. "Smells like heaven in here." Martha blushed. "I was just baking. It helps me think." He nodded, looking around her cozy kitchen. Crooked shelves, hand-stitched curtains, jars of spices she mixed herself. "It feels like a real home," he said softly. She froze. No one had said that in years. Her late husband had never cared for her baking or her decorations. He preferred practicality, not comfort. But Luke looked at the place like it was precious. She cleared her throat. "Would you like to try something?" He grinned. "Martha, I rode through half the county hoping you'd ask." She laughed, flustered, and set a warm gingerbread piece before him. Luke took a bite, closed his eyes, let out a low, appreciative sound that made her heart flip. "Best I've ever tasted," he said. "I'd pay triple again." "Luke," she protested, laughing. "I'm serious. I don't make a habit of praising folks unless they deserve it." His gaze held hers, steady and sincere. A story she never shared with anyone. As they ate, Luke leaned his elbows on the table. "You always bake like this?" he asked. Martha hesitated. "No one ever asked. No one cared. I used to bake every Christmas," she said slowly. "My husband didn't like sweets. Or much of anything I made, really." Luke's jaw tightened. Martha quickly continued. "He wasn't cruel. Just uninterested. I suppose I got used to being overlooked." Luke's voice dropped, deep and sure. "Martha, there ain't a thing about you that ought to be overlooked." Her throat tightened. She looked away before her eyes brimmed. "You deserve folks who see your worth," he added. "I don't know if I'm worth that much," she whispered. "You are," Luke said, no hesitation. "Maybe folks didn't recognize it before. But I do." Silence settled between them, but it wasn't heavy. It was warm, filled with the slow and careful stitching of trust. The unexpected invitation. After a long moment, Luke straightened. "I was wondering," he began gently, "if you might join me tomorrow afternoon. I'm bringing food out to some of the older ranchers who can't get to town. Could use some help." Her eyebrows lifted. "Me? Why me?" "Because you're thoughtful. And kind. And you make the kind of food that warms a man from the inside out." She blinked. "You really want me there?" He grinned, tipping his hat back slightly. "Martha, I'd be mighty grateful for the company." She felt something bloom inside her, something small, shy, and powerful. Hope. Possibility. A future she didn't dare speak yet. I'd be glad to go," she said softly. Luke's smile widened, warm as sunlight melting snow. "Good. Then it's a date." Her breath hitched. He didn't correct himself. He didn't blush. He just let the words sit there, honest and bare and real. A moment that changed everything. When Luke stood to leave, Martha walked him to the door. He paused, looking at her for a long moment. A look that said thank you and I see you and maybe something even deeper. "Martha," he said softly, "you're something special." Before she could respond, he stepped outside, pulling his coat tight, but not taking his eyes off her. "I'll see you tomorrow." She watched him mount his horse and ride through the snow, his silhouette steady against the winter sun. When she closed the door, she had to steady herself against the wall. Her heart felt full in a way she'd forgotten it could. For the first time in years, she felt chosen. The morning of the ranch delivery dawned crisp and golden, snow sparkling like crushed diamonds across the hills. Martha carried her basket with care, the warm scents of gingerbread, spiced nuts, and her apple bread drifting behind her like a fragrant invitation. Her heart pounded, not with fear this time but with excitement. Today wasn't about the auction. Today wasn't about gossip or whispers. Today was about sharing her heart with someone who truly saw it. The rancher's surprise. Luke met her at the edge of the yard, his wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the sun, boots crunching in the snow. His smile, steady and warm, made her chest flutter. "Martha," he said, voice quiet but firm. "You made it." She nodded, breath catching in the cold air. I wouldn't miss it. The ranch hands were scattered across the yard, chopping firewood and tending to the morning chores. When they saw her, some raised eyebrows, some grinned, and a few exchanged whispers. Luke didn't hesitate. These are Martha's baskets. Every last one. You're going to eat it and you're going to enjoy it. And don't even think of telling her otherwise. The men laughed, but there was no mockery in their tone. Respect lingered in the air, respect for Martha for her talent and more quietly for Luke. The first delivery. Luke guided her to the first cabin. The elderly rancher inside, a thin man with a crooked back and a sharp glint in his eye, looked skeptical at first. Martha stepped forward, basket in hand. Sir, I brought you a little something for Christmas, she said softly. The man glanced at Luke, who simply nodded. Then he looked down at the basket, then at Martha. A slow, surprised smile spread across his face. Well, smells like heaven in here, he muttered, reaching for a gingerbread cookie. Martha felt warmth flood her chest. She smiled tentatively, and for the first time in weeks she felt seen and appreciated. A quiet moment with Luke. After delivering the last basket, Luke led her back to the main ranch house. Snowflakes clung to their coats. The sun was low, casting long golden streaks across the frozen ground. Thank you, Martha said quietly. I never thought anyone would actually ask me to do something like this, not just bake but be part of something. Luke's eyes softened. You're part of it, Martha. You always were. I just gave you a reason to see it. Her heart thudded at the intensity of his gaze. Slowly, almost shyly, he reached out. She didn't move away. Instead, their hands met. Warm, steady, and certain. I've been wanting to say something since the auction, Luke murmured, and I figure now's as good a time as any. Martha's breath caught. What is it? He took a small step closer. Martha, I like you. Not just your baking. Not just your kindness. I like you. Every part of you. Tears pricked the corners of her eyes. She had spent years believing herself invisible, overlooked, not worth anyone's attention. And here he was, standing in the golden light of a snowy ranch, telling her she mattered. I like you too, she whispered, voice trembling. I've been afraid to believe anyone could. Luke smiled, gentle but unyielding, and leaned in. She met him halfway. Their lips brushed, soft and tender at first, then lingering as if both had been waiting a lifetime for this simple act of closeness. The Christmas miracle. They pulled back slightly, foreheads resting together, breathing in the cold, crisp air. Behind them, the ranch lay quiet. The ranch hands had gone about their work, but now they paused, watching silently, smiling knowingly. Luke brushed a snowflake from Martha's hair. Looks like we made our own little Christmas miracle, he said softly. She laughed, a sound full of relief and happiness. I never thought a basket could bring this much joy. Not the basket, Martha, Luke said, tilting her chin gently. You did. You always did. I just saw it. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady thrum of his heart. For the first time in years, Martha felt safe, cherished, and loved, not for what she could do but for who she was. The snow continued to fall softly, covering the ranch in quiet white, as Martha and Luke held each other, hearts warming against the cold, surrounded by the magic of a Christmas that neither would ever forget.